Wealth, fame, power.
What's going on? It's your host Tokyo Tron, and welcome to episode number 3 of Power Scaling all of One Piece. This time we'll be going over the Syrup Village arc, and just like previous weeks, there's not too many characters that I have to scale in this arc, so I'm gonna go through the whole arc in its entirety and scale all of the relevant characters. So the first character that I want to quickly cover is Yasopp. He wasn't physically in this arc, but we did get a flashback of him through Luffy. Another thing that I want to point out before scaling him is that this was a flashback from the same time that the red-haired pirates were with Kid Luffy at Fuchsia Village, so this won't be Yasopp's strength currently after Shanks has become a Yonko, because as I pointed out in the very first video, which should pop up in the top right corner, this was a time before Shanks was a Yonko, but after his duels with Mihawk, and it's kind of arguable whether he had the power of a Yonko as of now at that point in the story. Now back to Yasopp, I'm just gonna gas him up a little at first. So Luffy said that Yasopp is the best shooter and he doesn't miss anything within his range. Obviously Luffy watched Yasopp as a kid, but I'm inclined to take Luffy's word here and believe him. But now the real question is, so what exactly is Yasopp's range? Well, we don't have a very definitive answer of this, but he was able to shoot the center of an apple perfectly from a range of approximately anywhere between, I'd say maybe 50 and 100 feet. But with what we know about top tiers in the series, he can most definitely do a lot more than this, but I can't really assume that because I'm only using information from these first 3 arcs. One really important thing about Luffy's statement that can actually back it up is the fact that Yasopp is a commander on Shanks' crew. And as far as we know, Yasopp might be one of the only people at a commander level within the whole One Piece world that focuses on shooting. At least if we don't consider Van Augur and Blackbeard's crew. So this means that Yasopp has the power of a Yonko commander, but at the same time, he's a Yonko commander primarily focused on sniping or shooting or whatever he does. Meaning that he's up there with the top tiers in the verse, and it's because of his skill with the gun, which is unrivaled in the One Piece verse. Another cool thing about Yasopp is that he's also precise enough to shoot between the eyes of an ant. Again, this was probably because this was early One Piece, because honestly this isn't that impressive considering what people can do, but for this point in the story it's still a pretty good feat. So as I was saying before, I'm not really sure if at this point in the story he would be around 2nd commander or 3rd commander level, and I'm also not sure in general how the chain of command works in Shanks' crew. It's not really clear yet. We know that Ben Beckman's definitely the right hand, but then it's kind of a toss-up of whether it's Yasopp or Lucky Roo next. But seeing how Lucky Roo took the initiative, I could assume that Yasopp would be the 3rd in command. So at this point in the story, I would put him as YC3+. Again, this is back in the Kid Luffy era, it's not Shanks' current crew's power level. And now on to characters that have been introduced in this arc. The first pair is the Nyambon brothers. Now, the Nyambon brothers' scaling is pretty weird and kind of inconsistent, and this is mainly because of how much Oda wanked them initially. Even though there was some foul play, Sham was still able to rip 2 of Zoro's swords off his hip without Zoro even really reacting. We can make arguments and cases for Zoro that he wasn't paying attention, and even Sham said that he caught Zoro off guard by acting like he was weak, but even though Zoro wasn't fully prepared, the fact that he was able to do this without Zoro even being able to react means that Sham at minimum has to be at least in the same tier as Zoro. And then even more wank for Sham, we even have panels where he's essentially just toying with Zoro, messing around during the fight, And then he even just has a scene where Sham literally jumps on top of Zoro's back and sits on him as Zoro's dashing at him. So the Sham wank is just really strong off rip. But the thing that really doesn't make sense about this is as soon as Zoro gets his swords back, he 1v2s the Nyambon brothers and one-shots them. And this makes it really hard to scale Sham here because it seems like Sham was completely outclassing Zoro in terms of speed, but for some reason as soon as Zoro got all three swords back, his speed suddenly increased and he was able to blitz and one-shot him, which really doesn't make sense to me. I can understand that Zoro was obviously much stronger with 3 swords than he is with 1, but the speed difference doesn't really make that much sense. I just have to put it up to some maybe Oda inconsistent writing here, not really thinking about it too much. But either way, I would throw Sham in mid tier right behind Buggy. And now onto the second Yaman brother, Bucci. So Bucci gets one shot, like I said, in the 1v2, but right after he gets kind of revived in a sense and powered up by Django. And it's actually a pretty ridiculous buff because of Django's hypnotism abilities. I'll cover this a bit later on in the video, but even with his power up, he's still one shot by Zoro, so he's also mid tier with his brother, and honestly I'm gonna have to put him right behind him. Next up is Django, and as I was just saying, he's actually pretty ridiculous. So physically he's not anything too special, he's either a low tier or a low mid tier, just because of how easily he can deal with fodder, but his abilities are straight up hacked. So his hypnotism is kind of okay-ish offensively, but it really won't work on anyone that's not an absolute idiot. It can seemingly put anyone to sleep that he wants it to, no matter how strong they are, but it also requires them to make direct eye contact with it for a pretty long time. I think it was like 3 seconds or so. So theoretically, Django would be able to put someone like even Kaido to sleep, but to do that, Kaido would have to be staring straight at Django's hypnotism tool for a solid 3 seconds without looking away, which doesn't make any sense for a top tier or basically anyone of any moderate amount of intelligence in the One Piece world to do. So for that reason, his hypnotism isn't super strong offensively, but as a support ability, it's completely busted. So in this arc, when Django hypnotizes his own crew, it takes people that were getting low diffed by Usopp and Nami to people that could shatter the side of a hill with one punch. So presumably this would scale up based on how strong the person is at base. It wouldn't just be something that buffs you to being able to bust a mountain like it did for the fodder tier people. So I assume that as you get stronger, the buff gets stronger like with it, so it would just scale in that way. But we don't know how far the hypnotism can scale to. But from how it was portrayed in this arc, it seems more like the hypnotism, it allows you to use your peak strength, so basically just everything possible, no matter how much damage it actually does to your body, and it even seems like it might be able to buff you on top of your peak strength. And this is the reason why I'm saying that Django is busted. If there's any sort of large scale battle, if you have Django on your side, you're winning, at least in terms of the fodder versus fodder matchup, because Django can just buff his whole squad, just buff everyone and have them just whoop basically anyone else that was on a similar tier as them before. So honestly, if we look at Django's ability in that sense, it's really a top tier in the verse. But just because of how Oda writes him, and because Django's not super intelligent, and on top of that his actual strength feats are low tier to low mid tier, I'm gonna have to put him in mid tier right above Buggy. But with that said, I still put tremendous respect on Django's hypnotism ability, at least how it's related to supporting his team. And now on to Django's captain, Klahadore or Captain Kuro. And his speed feats are absolutely ridiculous for this point in the story. Using his Shakushi technique, he's able to move so fast that he can wipe out his whole crew in seconds, and he's also so fast that Luffy can't even see his movements. And seeing how fast he is, this might be a bit blasphemous, but I would compare his speed to maybe even a Gear 2 Luffy. And even though he was so fast to the point where Luffy couldn't even see him, he got defeated in the way that you all assume. As soon as he attacked Luffy, Luffy just grabbed onto the attack and beat him. So Kuro's defense and attack potency really isn't too strong, but his speed is nothing to scoff at. The only problem is, even though he was super fast, his speed didn't matter since at the end of the day he lost to Luffy. And since I'm trying to make this tier list so everyone above someone wins and everyone below someone would lose, there's no objective way that I can put Kuro on top of Luffy in this case. So he's gonna go in mid tier right behind Luffy and Zoro. And finally, what you've been all waiting for, Go D Usopp. Usopp is actually a tank, and he's ridiculously scary with prep time. He's not very physically imposing, but he can take a beating and get up from it. So he's seemingly superhuman, or at least peak human in physicality. And by peak human, I mean peak human as in normal human from the real world, Not peak human as in stronger than Zoro, because Zoro's still just a regular dude. So he definitely has better durability feats than any other person in the fodder, and arguably better durability feats than anyone else in low tier. In this arc, he's also able to outwit large groups of fodder and pretty much 1v20 them at the beginning, but this also was with around a day of prep time. But unfortunately for Usopp in this arc, as soon as they got their buff from Django, Usopp was no match, but this also led to another outstanding durability feat from him. So you had these guys who with one punch could now shatter small cliffs / mountains, etc. And one of them picked up a giant stone axe, hit Usopp on the head with it. Usopp did fall down, but not completely knocked out, and he was able to get up and still keep on fighting. So you have someone who's able to just with one punch shatter a mountain, and now wielding an axe, Usopp can somewhat tank a hit. So his durability is actually just crazy here. But even though Usopp's durability is so high in comparison to others, it's definitely nowhere near the tier of Zoro or Luffy. And also the list is based on 1v1s, and with matchups in consideration, I really can't see Usopp beating anyone up in mid tier, but I think he can go in low mid tier since he should be able to beat everyone in low tier and below. But just keep in mind, with prep time, Usopp could most likely beat everyone besides Zoro and Luffy in mid tier. Speaking of Zoro and Luffy, I'll talk about them fairly quickly in this arc. So Zoro and Luffy both haven't gotten pushed yet at this point in the story, and we haven't seen any training yet or significant power-ups, so I'd say that they're still around the same strength that they were at the very beginning of their journey together. But we did get some nice feats out of both of them, just putting things into place. And this is a trend that we see with Zoro and Luffy for the first couple arcs. They don't necessarily get stronger, but their feats get larger and larger, implying that they always had the power to do this from the beginning, but an opponent wasn't strong enough to force them to show their real power or real strength yet. So first off, we have Luffy, who's able to just rip this huge piece off a ship with seemingly not too much effort, and also he did it with his bare hands, and the ship was in really good condition. And this is actually a super impressive feat, because not only was he able to lift something that was super heavy, he was able to just pull it out of a ship, which as you can tell just from real life is a lot harder than punching something and breaking it. So Luffy's feats have normally just been punching through something, but now he's strong enough to seemingly just rip ships apart, at least if they're on a small to mid ship level. Then we got some more feats out of Zoro, as he's able to easily overpower and one-shot someone who could shatter small mountains with their strikes. So I guess that I should quickly talk about Kaya, Mary, and Team Usopp. So they're all pretty irrelevant, they're all just regular civilians, so obviously I'm gonna put them in civilian tier. So to sum up the scaling for Syrup Village, first I have Usopp coming in at the very bottom at low mid tier, then in mid tier is the Nyaibon brothers, and right above them is Django, and above them is Kuro. Then we go all the way up to commander level with Yasopp at YC3+. And as always, that's just my take, so now let me hear yours down below in the comment section. And go ahead and drop a like since I know you enjoyed this video, and to stay up to date with all my future content, make sure to like and subscribe.